So, this incident happened to my mom before she had me over 20 years ago. She worked at a local pub. The pub mainly catered for fishermen, as the town was on the coast of Western Australia. So she knew most of the people who would come in for drinks or food. However, every now and again people from town would come in. She told me that this one guy who came in she knew from house parties around the place and always wanted to talk to her while she was working and would say sorry and keep doing her thing. One night she finished work around midnight and walked home, which is only a few kilometers away. She lived with a few housemates who all were guys. When she got home from her shift, she decided to have a shower. Making her way back to her room, she realized that her door was open, which is normally shut. All the fellas were asleep, so she blew it off as the wind or something. She laid down in bed to go to sleep, but something didn't feel right, and for reasons that she can't explain to me, she felt the need to look under the bed. What she saw under the bed was the guy from the bar. He had followed her all the way home. She tells me that she just stared at him for ages, and he didn't move. He didn't even breathe, to the point where she thought he was dead. She went out of her room calmly and went to one of the guys' room to tell them that she had a dead man under her bed. They all raced in with baseball bats to find the guy halfway out the window. He managed to escape and run away. The police were called, and because they knew who he was, the cops picked him up the next day. The thing that bothers me the most is what his intentions were with my mom that night. That asshole got a fine and was never allowed back in town. Too soft, in my opinion. I'm 22 years old, and this incident happened to me a year and a half ago. I just moved into my first apartment and was still in the process of moving in. The door that leads into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail and still on the phone. I accidentally dropped the phone on the floor. It landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch out for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head in his chest, so I couldn't see his face, and he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just gonna take a shower, and I'll call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in and quietly locked the door, turned my shower on, and jumped out my window. My apartment is on the first floor. I called the police and they told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out of the door. This was during the summer, and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he came just before the police. I gave them the keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin, tired-looking man. His eyes looked absolutely crazy, but he didn't even try to get away. The policeman that stood beside me and comforted me while the other cops searched through my house told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under my bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. I went to university in Miami, I studied Management Information Systems in Florida International University. Miami is a pretty chill city, one where I thought that stuff like this could never happen. Anyway, to break right into the story, I used to roommate with two other dudes about 3 or 4 miles off campus. They were cool, studious, and pretty much really good people, except for roommate number 2, which I will refer to as Will for the sake of this story. He used to be really irresponsible in locking the front door whenever he left in the morning. We told Will time and time again that he had to lock the door. Out of the 3 of us, Will was always the one that left the latest because his classes started sometime after 11 a.m. My other roommate almost religiously left earlier than 11 a.m. every morning and never came back until 4 or 5 p.m. every single day. Anyway, if I remember correctly, it was a Thursday and I had just gotten home around 5:30 p.m. I was exhausted after taking a very complicated math class. I pulled out my key and tried to open the lock, and the door was already open. I cursed under my breath, but fuck it. I was too tired to deal with this shit right now. I make my way into the house and notice none of my other roommates are home yet. I go into my room, drop my bag in the corner, and just collapse on the bed. Now I have this fear of letting my hand hang off the edge of the bed for fear of a rat nibbling on my fingers or a monster ripping my hand off. Lo and behold, this day I just let my hand rest off the end of the bed. I'm kind of letting it dangle and swing a bit while thinking if I did good on the test that I had taken previously that day, when all of a sudden I brush what can be described as a closely shaven hairbrush. I think, what the fuck? That's weird. Did I leave some sort of shoes under my bed or something? I poke it again and notice that it's kind of fleshy. I try to pinch it and then it just recoiled back. At this point, I noticed that it was something alive. My heart instantly starts racing and I feel like I want to faint. I think it's a dog or a fucking raccoon that crawled through my window. Long before these thoughts pass my head, out comes this crackhead from under the bed, screaming, "No shoot me, please, no shoot me." I flail my hands in the air and ask him what the fuck he's doing here. He screams at me in Spanish. I don't know what he's saying, but I tell him to get the fuck out before I call the police. This dude just shuffles outside, looking all disheveled and dirty. I close the door behind him and try to gather my breath. After some looking around, I noticed that 2 of my watches and my favorite gold rings were gone. I was pretty much pissed and scared for the rest of the day, but mainly grateful that he didn't shoot or stab me. I'm a 25-year-old female. I was 23 at the time that this took place. I had been a college student but had to quit due to major surgery on my leg, so I was unemployed and just spent months sitting around recovering. I was finally off crutches but still limping around. I lived, and still live, in an old Victorian 2-story house that is now a duplex. I live on the ground floor, and a middle-aged reclusive woman occupies the whole second floor. There are separate outside entrances. I lived with a male housemate that was also a friend, who was a few years older than me, and was employed as a security guard at a local casino. Our street is known for being seedy and not a good neighborhood, but I've always felt pretty safe and never had much trouble. One night I was home with my roommate and my boyfriend. We were watching movies in the living room that is in front of the house. My roommate's girlfriend came over with a drunk male friend of ours. The male friend sat down to watch movies with us and immediately passed out. and my roommate and his girlfriend went into his bedroom at the back of the house and immediately started having the most insanely loud sex I've ever heard. She always sounded like the trashiest porn star or hooker, and the screaming could be heard from the street outside. A few minutes into their session, my boyfriend and I were still watching movies and heard a loud sound coming from the back of the house. We couldn't distinguish what it was, maybe something getting knocked over, but we figured it was just my roommate and his girlfriend being extremely loud and all over the place. Eventually they finished and the house was quiet again. Our movie ended and we decided to go to bed in my room. My room is in the middle of the house and shares a wall with my roommate's room, and the living room is on the other side. My bed is against the outside wall of my room, parallel to a window that slides up and down. The side and back of our house is pretty high off the ground. Looking out the window, it's a pretty decent drop. Outside my window are vertical and horizontal beams that extend to hold up a little back porch balcony for the lady upstairs. It really ruins the view having beams right there. My boyfriend went into my room and took off all of his clothes and jumped into my bed. I started to take off my clothes, but stopped when I noticed that the screen on my window was missing. I had an indoor cat at the time, so my first thought was, the screen is missing. Strega must have gotten out of the window. Then I noticed that the window was pushed up way more than I thought was possible. I kept thinking of my cat though. I was obsessed with keeping her inside. My first thought was to look under the bed and see if maybe she was under there. It was dark and I saw a black mass and reached out to grab her, thankful that she was still inside. The black mass wasn't her. It was a black hoodie, and someone was in it. I had grabbed someone's arm. For some reason, my first thought at the moment was that a friend was playing a prank on me and was probably somebody I knew, so I kinda laughed and said, "Hey, there's someone under here." Then I lowered my face to meet the face of the person and realized that I have never seen this guy's face before in my life. This was not a friend, and not a joke. "Hey, I don't know this guy," I said a little less calmly. My boyfriend was completely naked and told me to grab my gun, as I was closer to the closet than he was. "Stay where you are," he screamed to the mass under the bed. The guy cooperated. I threw my boyfriend a robe and he put it on and jumped out of the bed near the closet where I was. He took the gun and pointed it at the bed and told the guy to come out slowly with his hands up. Since my roommate is a security guard, I ran to wake him up for backup. He rushed into the room and the three of us stood there as a teenage boy wearing a black hoodie came out from under the bed. We were all kind of in shock and started to question the kid, who cooperated with us completely. He was quiet and humble. His eyes shook violently from side to side, as if he was high or something. My roommate shook him down. We emptied his pockets, and he had condoms, lube, porn advertisements from the back of a dirty magazine, the kind where you can call a number and talk to a woman, and some dirty pills that he told us were Vicodin, but they were just actually extra-strength ibuprofen. He also had a pair of my dirty underwear in his pocket. Dirty underwear that had my period all over it. That was the most disgusting part. We found an ID on him as well, and a business card for a youth probation officer, so he clearly was a troublemaker. We also found a piece of paper with names and phone numbers that indicated that he lived with his mother in a hotel room in a notorious drug motel that catered to prostitutes and meth. His high school ID was from Hoopa High, and he was clearly from the local Hoopa Native American tribe, or at least part Hoopa Native. When we saw that he had no weapons, we started questioning why he was in my bedroom underneath my bed with all this stuff, and asked him if he realized how serious this was. He quietly replied that he heard sex from the street and thought that he could have some. Basically, He was a horny teenage boy on some sort of drug, riding his bike around at night, and my roommate's trashy girlfriend's sex noises was like a siren song in the night to this kid. He was so overcome by his own horniness that he scaled a scaffolding and beams near my open window and crawled in and under my bed and probably masturbated to what he was hearing in the next room. He probably jizzed on my underwear. He kept apologizing and saying that he was sorry and that he knows that what he did was stupid. I was still shocked and disgusted and wondering if he would have raped me had I been alone. But we all felt a little compassion for this fucked up little kid. His fate was basically in our hands. We debated on whether or not to call the police, and finally decided not to. You can debate me on how wrong I am on that later. We basically lectured him and told him how lucky he was that he crawled into my window and not someone else's, because he would have been shot or called the police and had him arrested, and whatever that he was on probation for would have gotten a lot worse. He kept thanking us and was super humble at that point. My roommate then escorted him out of the front door and took his bike that he left out on the lawn and walked him to his shitty motel and watched him go inside. We kept all of his stuff. He didn't have any money, just the trash and IDs and phone numbers. We made sure to tell him that we had his ID, knew where he lived, had his mom's number and his probation officer's number, and that if we ever saw him on the street again, he would regret it. Our drunk friend and my roommate's girlfriend slept through this entire ordeal. We had to tell them the next morning what had happened while they slept. I know that I'm going to get a lot of shit from you guys for not calling the police, so I'm going to try to explain why we didn't. First of all, if I had been alone without my boyfriend there, I would have definitely called the police after defending myself with my gun. That would have been a completely different situation. In this case, I had my boyfriend in the room and my male roommate, so we had the kid outnumbered. Secondly, as soon as I discovered the kid, he cooperated and showed no signs of aggression or intent to harm. He did everything we told him to. Third, upon searching him, even though he had condoms and lube, which is creepy, he had no weapons. This indicated to us that he had no plans to rape or assault. He probably just really wanted the thrill of masturbating under my bed while listening to the sex taking place in the next room. He wasn't a big guy either. He was a little skinny kid that I could have easily overpowered even with my small frame. From the info that we found on this kid, he was a neglected, horny teenage boy living with a druggy mom in a shitty motel. So yeah, we felt a little sorry for him in the end. The fact that he was a Hoopa native also scared us a bit, because people from Hoopa out here are known for violence and gang activity. That made us realize that though we doubted this kid was violent, it's quite possible his family members are, and either he would get the shit beaten out of him by family, or we would after getting him arrested. In the end, I'm still terrified to keep my window open, but I think that we handled it well without getting the police involved. After talking to the kid, I really think that he was thankful for letting him go with just a lecture. Having a gun pointed at him the whole time probably scared him enough to realize that it was a serious offense that he won't be repeating.